My wife was in the emergency room, put there by her lover's wife. The doctor who called sounded sympathetic. When I arrived, she was lying on a gurney, her face a mess of blood and bruises. Her eyes, when they found me, flashed with a desperate plea for help. The family needs to sign off on this, the doctor said, holding out a clipboard, and we need to take care of the surgical fees. I looked at the swollen, distorted face, both familiar and alien. Who is this? I asked. I think you've made a mistake. The hope in my wife's eyes and Chloe's eyes instantly froze. The light in them died, inch by inch. Those eyes, which had once gazed at me with such affection, which had crinkled in 1,000 smiles meant only for me, now held nothing but shock, followed by a tidal wave of despair. Her lips trembled, flecked with blood and spittle, but she couldn't force a single word out. The doctor's clipboard hung in midair, his professional pity hardening on his face. His tone grew hesitant. Mr. Thorne, this is your wife, Chloe Thorne. Are you certain you don't know her? My gaze was a scalpel, tracing a calm path across Chloe's battered features. The face I had kissed countless times was now swollen beyond recognition, a canvas of angry, purple, and raw, bloody scratches. But I felt nothing, not a single ripple of emotion. Doctor, I'm positive. I don't know this woman, I said. My voice was so steady it was frightening, even to me. If you made an error, I suggest you contact her actual family as soon as possible. The tears finally broke free from Chloe's eyes, mingling with the blood streaking down her cheeks. She tried to push herself up, but the pain sent her crashing back onto the gurney with a choked, guttural moan. It was a sound of agony, but it was drowned out by something 1,000 times more potent, the raw terror of absolute abandonment. I didn't look at her again. I pulled out my iPhone, my fingers swiping calmly across the screen until I found the number I knew by heart. The call connected. Mr. Davies, I need you at Metro General Hospital immediately. There are some urgent matters to attend to. My voice cut through the chaotic din of the hallway, clear and cold. The doctor's expression soured. He made one last attempt. Mr. Thorne, the patient's injuries are serious. There could be an intracranial hemorrhage. We need to operate soon. I cut him off. I'm not her next of kin. I have no authority to sign that paper. I paused, turning my gaze to him. The cold fluorescent lights glinted off the lenses of my wire-rimmed glasses. May I ask who called me? The question caught him off guard. He stammered. It was the woman who called 911. She said she was the wife of the patient's lover. She gave us your number. The lover's wife. The phrase was a poison knife, twisting into the rotten core of our marriage. A small, humorless smile touched my lips, a pure, arctic curve of irony. I turned and walked out of the room. The sharp, rhythmic click of my dress shoes on the polished linoleum floor sounded like a death knell for our relationship. I didn't look back, completely ignoring the desperate heat of Chloe's stare, which I could feel trying to burn a hole through my back. At the end of the hall, I saw a well-dressed but disheveled middle-aged woman. She was screaming hysterically in her phone, her face a mask of rage and triumph. That must be her, the assailant. Mark Peterson's wife, Sarah, a victim and also a monster. But none of it had anything to do with me anymore. My world, which had shattered the moment that doctor called, was already being rebuilt by my own two hands, piece by cold, deliberate piece. The smell of antiseptic in the hospital lobby was overpowering. I had just reached the main entrance when a dark shape lunged at me with the force of a hurricane. Lucas, my mother-in-law, Karen, her meticulously maintained face now twisted in fury, grabbed the collar of my shirt. Her nails dug into my neck. What the hell is your problem? Chloe's in there, half dead, and you're pretending you don't know her. Are you even human? Her shrieking drew the attention of everyone in the lobby. I stood perfectly still, letting her shake me. My eyes drifted down to the hand clutching my collar. Karen, please let go, I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried an undeniable command. I will call security. Security? You have a nerve to call security? Karen laughed, a harsh, grating sound. She jabbed a finger at my face, sending flecks of spittle flying. You ungrateful, heartless bastard. Chloe married you, took care of you, ran this house for you. Now that you've made it big, you think you can just kick her to the curb? I'll tell you something, not a chance in hell. She had edited her usual tirade, omitting the part about Chloe giving me children. It seemed she still had enough sense to remember that our childless marriage was a well-known fact. I calmly corrected her. Karen, first, we don't have any children. Second, I think you know exactly what your daughter has been up to. Karen's face went white for a split second, the fleeting panic of being exposed. But just as quickly, The mask of the belligerent shrew returned. What about my daughter? So she went out with some friends and had a little fall. As her husband, the least you could do is show some concern, not stand here making snide remarks. You're going to sign those papers. You're going to pay for her surgery. If you don't, I'm not leaving this hospital. She was making a scene, trying to use volume and baseless accusations to seize the moral high ground. She'd picked the wrong target. I slowly took my phone out of my pocket. Right in front of her, I opened the voice memo app and hit the record button. The small red circle pulsed on the screen like a cold, watchful eye. Karen, are you sure your daughter just had a little fall? I enunciated each word, my voice recording clearly into the phone's microphone. Because in a little while, I'll have the hospital's preliminary diagnosis and the police report. Both will state very clearly that she was assaulted. What you're doing right now is obstructing the truth. If you lie to the police, that's a crime. My mother-in-law's tirade stopped dead. She stared at the recording interface on my phone, her eyes darting nervously. Her bluster began to deflate. But people like her never give up easily. The next second, she plopped down onto the floor and started slapping her thighs, wailing. Oh, why is my life so miserable? I raised a daughter who married this soulless monster. My baby gets beaten up, and her husband doesn't care. He even threatens a poor old woman like me. Is there any justice in this world? Her performance successfully drew a larger crowd, many of whom were now pointing and whispering in my direction. I watched her, expressionless, feeling not even a flicker of disgust. It was just pathetic. Just then, a calm, steady voice spoke from behind me. Mr. Thorne. I turned. Mr. Davies had arrived. He was dressed in a crisp suit, his hair perfectly combed, his eyes sharp and professional. He ignored the spectacle Karen was making on the floor, walked directly to me, handed me his business card, and then turned to her. Ma'am, my name is Davies. I am Mr. Thorne's legal counsel. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the distinct authority of a seasoned lawyer. Regarding Ms. Miller's medical expenses and all subsequent related matters, my client, Mr. Thorne, has fully authorized me to handle them. If you have any demands, please direct them to my firm through the proper legal channels. Karen's wails sputtered to a halt, as if someone had hit the mute button. She stared, dumbfounded, at the impeccably dressed lawyer who had appeared out of nowhere. The arrival of an attorney had instantly elevated this messy family drama into a legal battle, a field where she was hopelessly outmatched and deeply afraid. Hospital security arrived at that moment, politely but firmly asking Karen to leave and not disturb the peace. As they helped her to her feet, she shot me one last venomous glare, but under Mr. Davies' cold, unwavering gaze, she just stamped her foot in frustration and shuffled away. Mr. Davies and I sat down at a coffee shop across the street. The sunlight was bright, and I adjusted my glasses. Mr. Davies, I said, I want a divorce. I showed him the files I'd saved on my phone, the evidence I had discovered long ago, but had held on to, waiting, intimate texts between Chloe and the other man, receipts from luxury hotels, transaction records showing her secretly transferring funds from our joint account. My terms are simple, I said, looking at my own blurred reflection in the dark surface of my coffee. My voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. She walks away with nothing. The next day, the hospital called. Chloe was awake and wanted to see me. Without hesitation, I called Mr. Davies, and we went together. Stepping back into that hospital room, the antiseptic smell seemed even stronger. Chloe was propped up in bed, her face covered in thick bandages, only her eyes and mouth visible. Those eyes were now filled with a cocktail of sorrow, fear, and a sliver of cautious hope. When she saw me, she rasped my name. Lucas. I stood impassively at the foot of the bed, maintaining a safe, clinical distance. Mr. Davies stood beside me, pen and notepad in hand, all business. It didn't feel like a hospital visit. It felt like an arraignment. Tears started rolling down Chloe's cheeks again. Lucas, I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please, just forgive me this one time. Please. I swear, I'll never do it again. It was a moment of weakness. Her pleas were choked with sobs, each word trembling. She sounded utterly pathetic. Once, that might have been enough to soften me. But now, my heart, which had died the moment I discovered her betrayal, was cold stone. Flashes of memory assaulted me, unbidden. When we were first married, her smiling face nestled against my chest as she promised we'd build a beautiful life together. The time I worked for a month straight on a major project and came home to find her waiting with a bowl of hot soup. The exhaustion and deep satisfaction I felt after pulling 3 all-nighters to land a nearly impossible contract just so I could buy her that designer handbag she'd been eyeing. All those moments that had once warmed me were now razor blades, slicing away at a heart already shredded beyond repair. A moment of weakness, I said, my voice sounding distant, as if it belonged to someone else. I looked at her as if she were a total stranger. Chloe, how long have you been cheating? 6 months? A year? Longer? My question was a precision strike, cutting right through her facade. Her face went deathly pale, her eyes darting around the room, unable to meet mine. And another thing, I continued, why did you take $75,000 from our joint account? That money was for a down payment on a new house for our parents. I didn't. Who told you that? Lucas, you can't just accuse me of things, she shot back, a last, desperate attempt at denial. Mister, Davies said nothing. He simply stepped forward and placed a stack of documents on the bedside table in front of her. On top were the bank statements, every transfer clearly detailed. Beneath them were several high-resolution photos. In them, Chloe was kissing another man outside a 5-star hotel, their bodies pressed together. The man's face was in clear profile. It was him, Mark Peterson. Chloe's eyes fell on the photos and the bank records, and it was as if all the strength drained out of her body. Every lie, every excuse, crumbled to dust in the face of the hard evidence. She finally broke. Covering her face with her hands, she let out a strangled, hopeless sob. Lucas, please. For the sake of all the years we've been together, just give me one more chance. I really know I was wrong. She was begging now, trying to use our shared history as leverage. I looked at her, a weeping mess, and felt nothing but a profound sense of weariness and disgust. Chloe, there's no trust left between us, I said, my voice cold and final, stripped of any lingering sentiment. I only came here today to tell you one thing. The divorce papers are ready. Mr. Davies has them. You get nothing. If you refuse to sign, I have no problem making all of this public. I imagine Mark Peterson's wife would be very interested. My ultimatum seemed to stun her into silence. She stared at me, unable to believe that the man who had once doted on her could be so ruthless. She didn't sign immediately, saying she needed to think, but then she began tentatively asking about splitting our assets. I just laughed, a short, bitter sound. I didn't waste any more words on her, letting Mr. Davies handle everything. Leaving the room, I found my mother-in-law, Karen, waiting in the hall. She must have gotten the gist from Chloe, because the moment she saw me, she flew into a rage. Lucas, you soulless monster. A modern-day Benedict Arnold. Chloe is lying in a hospital bed, and you're divorcing her? And trying to leave her with nothing? Is your heart made of stone? She learned her lesson and didn't get physical, instead opting for a loud, public character assassination from the moral high ground. Karen, if you want to take this to the press, be my guest, I said calmly. But you'd better be prepared for your daughter's dirty laundry to be front-page news right alongside it. My words shut her up, but only for a moment. She started shouting down the hospital corridor, spreading a twisted, exaggerated version of the story about how I was abandoning my sick wife and was a cold-hearted user. Soon, gossip was swirling through the hospital. Someone even snapped a picture and posted it online with a clickbait headline. Wife assaulted and hospitalized, heartless husband denies knowing her and demands divorce. The story started to gain traction online. My phone began buzzing with calls from unknown numbers and a flood of hateful text messages. I wasn't surprised. I had Mr. Davies prepare all our evidence, ready for a counteroffensive. I also reached out to a few reputable media outlets, preparing to release a full statement when the time was right. That's when an unexpected visitor arrived. A well-dressed man, looking every bit the successful executive, walked into Chloe's room carrying a fruit basket. It was her lover, Mark Peterson. I watched him from around the corner. He seemed relieved to find Chloe alone. But when he turned and saw me standing there, a flash of panic and guilt crossed his face. He quickly composed himself, adjusted his tie, and walked toward me. You must be Lucas, he said, adopting an air of superiority, trying to control the situation. We need to talk. He motioned for us to step aside, clearly hoping for a private settlement. Mr. Peterson, is it? I didn't move. I just looked at him. What would you like to talk about? The fact that you've been sleeping with my wife? Or the $75,000 you convinced her to transfer from our joint account to bail out your failing business? My voice was low, but in the quiet hallway, it boomed like thunder. Mark's face turned a sickly shade of gray. He hadn't expected me to know the details. He glanced at Mr. Davies standing beside me and realized this wasn't going to be easily resolved. His tone hardened, laced with a threat. Look, Lucas, let's be reasonable here. Making a scene isn't good for either of us. You don't want everyone knowing you've been made a fool of, do you? Think of your reputation. At that, I smiled. A cold, mocking smile filled with contempt. Mr. Peterson, you seem to have misunderstood something, I said, taking a step closer, my voice dropping to a near whisper. You're the one who needs to be reasonable. And you're the one whose reputation is on the line. What do you think would happen if I sent those photos of you two, along with the bank transfer records, directly to your wife? And maybe a copy to your company's ethics board for good measure. A sheen of cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Our entire conversation was recorded on my phone. I handed the file, along with everything else, to Mr. Davies. No sooner had Mark left than his wife, Sarah, arrived. She must have seen him on the hospital's security cameras, because she stormed back to the room, absolutely furious. All hell broke loose. The sound of things smashing, a woman's screams, a man's enraged shouts. It was pure chaos. When Sarah burst out of the room, she saw me. She stopped short, then rushed over, her face a storm of emotion. The first thing she did, incredibly, was apologize to me. Mr. Thorne, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't keep my dog on a tighter leash and let him ruin your life. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her gaze was sharp and clear. I have even more evidence on that tramp and my husband. Timelines, hotel receipts, text message archives. I have everything. If you need it, it's yours. She was a woman pushed to the brink by anger and betrayal, but she was also incredibly smart. She knew we were now allies. Our common enemy was the shameless pair in that hospital room. Armed with Sarah's evidence upgrade, my position was stronger than ever. I had Mr. Davies draft a comprehensive public statement. We kept the language professional and factual, simply stating that my wife, Chloe Thorne, had engaged in an extramarital affair and conspired with her lover, Mark Peterson, to illegally transfer marital assets. My supposed coldness and abandonment were nothing more than the lawful actions of a betrayed husband seeking to protect himself. At the end of the statement, we attached a few key pieces of evidence, with personal information redacted, screenshots of their intimate texts, the record of the $75,000 transfer, and a couple of the photos of them kissing outside the hotel. We released the statement through several media channels. It detonated online. The tide of public opinion turned with breathtaking speed. The same people who had been calling me a scumbag and a monster a day earlier were now flooding my mentions with sympathy, calling me the victim of the year. Their rage was redirected squarely at Chloe and Mark, the disgusting couple who redefined trashy. Chloe's social media accounts were unearthed and inundated with vile comments. Mark's employer and job title were doxed by internet sleuths, and his company's website and phone lines were overwhelmed by angry calls. In her hospital bed, seeing the hurricane of public condemnation, Chloe completely lost it. She called me, screaming, accusing me of being cruel, heartless, and trying to ruin her life. Finally, she threatened that if I didn't retract the statement and drop the divorce, she would jump out of the hospital window. In response to her threat, I calmly had Mr. Davies notify both the hospital and the police. I made it clear that Chloe was in an unstable mental state, that I was not responsible for any reckless action she might take, and I strongly urged the hospital to increase her supervision. Meanwhile, Mark Peterson was in hot water. His employer was a publicly traded company, and the scandal caused its stock to dip. He was facing immediate termination. Drowning in his own problems, he turned on Chloe, demanding she take all the blame to save his skin, or else. The once infatuated lovers predictably turned on each other like rabid dogs. My mother-in-law, Karen, went quiet for a couple of days after the public opinion shifted. Realizing she couldn't win a PR war, she switched tactics to emotional blackmail. She somehow got my parents' phone number and began harassing them, trying to guilt-trip them. She was met with a steel wall. My mother, usually the gentlest of souls, shut her down with uncharacteristic severity. We stand behind our son's decision, 100%. Your daughter made her bed. Now she has to lie in it. The Thorne family has done nothing to wrong you. After hanging up, my mom sent me a text. Son, don't be afraid. Your father and I are your rock. Do what you have to do. If the sky falls, we'll hold it up for you. Reading those words on my screen, my frozen heart felt the first flicker of warmth. Once Chloe's condition stabilized and she was discharged, I officially filed for divorce. The evidence we submitted was as thick as a phone book. The complete record of Chloe's infidelity, the bank statements detailing her illegal transfer of assets, and even the audio recording of Mark Peterson admitting to the affair and the financial entanglement. On the day of the hearing, Chloe wore heavy makeup to hide the lingering bruises and gauntness of her face. Her lawyer tried to twist the narrative, claiming I was primarily responsible for the breakdown of our marriage due to my long work hours and neglect of the family, which led Chloe to a momentary lapse in judgment. They even had the audacity to suggest her injuries were a result of domestic abuse from me. It was laughable. Mr. Davies didn't engage in theatrics. He simply and calmly presented our evidence to the judge, one piece at a time. First, the official medical report, reviewed by a forensic specialist. It clearly stated Chloe's injuries were consistent with a repeated assault by an external force, and the time of injury aligned perfectly with when I received the call from the hospital. During that entire period, I had an ironclad alibi. Second, the sworn testimony of Sarah Peterson. She admitted in court that she had assaulted Chloe, explaining in detail that it was because Chloe had destroyed her family. Third, the complete paper trail of the $75,000, along with receipts showing how Chloe had used the money to buy luxury goods for Mark and pay for their stays at high-end hotels. Each piece of evidence was a hammer blow, landing squarely on Chloe and her lawyer. Chloe resorted to her old tricks, launching into a tear-filled performance about her devotion to our home, crying about my coldness and cruelty. It was a convincing act, but a courtroom is a place for facts, not drama. Against the black and white evidence, her tears seemed pathetic and absurd. Her lawyer, who had started the day with booming confidence, was now sweating and stammering. My mother-in-law, Karen, caused a scene outside the courtroom, trying to disrupt the proceedings with her shouting, until a bailiff threatened her with contempt of court. In a dramatic twist, Mark Peterson was subpoenaed as a key witness. Under questioning from a judge, he reluctantly admitted to the affair with Chloe and the matter of the $75,000. The outcome was never in doubt. Based on the overwhelming evidence, the judge preliminarily found Chloe to be the party at fault in the marriage and demanded she provide a legal justification for the transfer of the $75,000. She couldn't, and her face went as white as a sheet. After the hearing, Chloe's lawyer approached me, suggesting a private settlement and hinting she would concede a portion of the assets. I looked at him and said only 5 words. "We'll let the law decide." The court's final judgment came down quickly. It was exactly as I'd anticipated. The divorce was granted. As the party at major fault, Chloe was ordered to return the full $75,000 she had misappropriated. Furthermore, she was awarded no other marital assets. In short, she walked away with nothing. Chloe announced her intention to appeal, which I fully expected. It was a stalling tactic. At the same time, she and Karen began posting long, rambling sob stories on social media, trying to paint me as a villain and gain sympathy. It was a wasted effort. Armed with the facts, the public saw right through their performance, meeting it with more ridicule and scorn. I was prepared for this. Mr. Davies immediately filed for an asset freeze, locking down the meager funds in Chloe's personal bank accounts to prevent her from hiding them or using them to fund her appeal. A checkmate. Then I took a second step. I contacted our banks and requested all credit card statements from the past few years. I discovered that Chloe, as an authorized user on several of my primary accounts, had run up enormous debts. In the last 6 months alone, she had engaged in a pattern of suspicious purchases, fraudulent transactions, and cash advances totaling over $30,000. I reported her for credit card fraud. After an investigation, the banks blacklisted her, permanently destroying her credit score and reserving the right to press criminal charges. Chloe was now financially radioactive. She wouldn't be able to get a loan, a mortgage, or even a credit card. Even renting an apartment or booking a flight would become nearly impossible. Meanwhile, Mark Peterson, desperate to save his own skin amidst the scandal, began to publicly distance himself from Chloe. He even released a statement on his own social media, claiming he was also a victim, deceived and manipulated by her. Chloe was now utterly alone. Seeing her daughter completely ruined, burdened with massive debt and a destroyed reputation, Karen finally broke. She tracked me down and cornered me outside my office building. The once arrogant, formidable woman was now a hunched, defeated figure, her face etched with desperation. Then, in front of dozens of my colleagues, she dropped to her knees. "Lucas, I'm begging you, please, let Chloe go," she cried, grabbing my pant leg. "She knows she was wrong. She really does. We accept her getting nothing, but you can't push her off a cliff. You can't destroy her." She clung to my leg, her tears streaming down her face. I looked down at her, my heart a frozen stone. "You reap what you sow." I pried her hands off me, my voice devoid of warmth. "Karen, she chose this path. Now she's paying the price." I walked past her and into the building, her desolate wails echoing behind me. A few days later, I filed for a court order to enforce the judgment, officially beginning the process of collecting the $75,000 she stole and the $30,000 plus she owed in credit card debt. Chloe's so-called friends, who had flocked to her when she was living high, now avoided her like the plague. Her social life had completely disintegrated. With everything settled, I felt a colossal weight lift from my chest. I opened my laptop and started browsing travel websites. It was time for a long overdue vacation, a grand opening ceremony for my new life. Chloe's appeal was, as expected, dismissed. She had lost all claim to any of my assets. Meanwhile, collection notices from the banks began arriving like an avalanche. Unable to pay, she was sued and officially listed as a chronically delinquent debtor, a pariah in the financial world. Cornered and with nothing left to lose, Chloe went on a final, crazed rampage. She began acting like a cornered animal, maliciously posting my private information online, my social security number, my home address, my phone number, and spewing vicious lies and slander. She even hired a network of online trolls to launch a coordinated smear campaign against me on every major platform. I was ready for it. I had Mr. Davies collect all the evidence and filed another lawsuit, this time for severe invasion of privacy and defamation. But then, things took a turn I hadn't anticipated. While investigating the troll farm Chloe had hired, the police discovered something else. To pay for the smear campaign, she had created fake online fundraisers, weaving tragic stories to scam money from unsuspecting donors. The case instantly escalated from a civil dispute to criminal fraud. Chloe was formally brought in for questioning and, due to the multiple charges against her, taken into custody. When Karen heard that her daughter was likely going to prison, she collapsed outside the police station. But it was too late for tears. I received the final decree from the court. My marriage to Chloe was legally and irrevocably dissolved. The court also ruled in my favor in the defamation suit, awarding me a significant sum for emotional damages. I donated every last cent of that money to a charitable foundation that helps women who are victims of domestic abuse and marital fraud. It was my way of closing that ugly chapter for good. I spent a weekend purging my home of every trace of her. Our wedding photos, her clothes, her bags, her makeup. I boxed it all up and threw it in the dumpster behind our apartment building. I watched as the space, once filled with the scent and clutter of her life, was slowly erased, returning to how it was before she ever entered it. I felt no sadness, no triumph, only a profound, unprecedented sense of peace. That marriage was like a raging fever. It had left me scarred, but it had also, finally, broken. I quit my high-paying but soul-crushing job as an IT project manager. With the money I'd saved, I partnered with a friend and started a small software development company, focusing on projects I was actually passionate about. In my free time, I started working out. I hit the gym 3 times a week, finding a raw, honest clarity in the feeling of sweat soaking through my shirt. I started to travel. Alone, with just a backpack, I visited all the places I'd always wanted to see, but never had the time for. I took cooking classes and a photography course. My life became full and meaningful. From the inside out, I began to feel alive again. At an industry conference, I ran into someone unexpected, Sarah Peterson, Mark's ex-wife. She was also divorced and had started her own successful consulting firm. She looked sharp, confident, and radiant. She walked over to say hello, a bright, self-assured smile on her face. "Mr. Thorne, it's been a while. You look good." She raised a glass of champagne and a toast. "And thank you. The evidence you provided helped me cut ties quickly and expose Mark's financial fraud." He walked away with nothing. We shared a look of mutual understanding, the kind only 2 survivors of the same shipwreck can share. We talked about our lives after the divorces and realized we had both emerged from the wreckage stronger and more resilient than before. We exchanged numbers, agreeing to grab coffee sometime to talk about business, about life. A quiet friendship, built on mutual respect and admiration, began to form. My parents were thrilled with my new life. My mom stopped pressuring me to date, telling me on the phone, "Son, you're doing great just as you are. Don't rush it. The right person will come along when the time is right." I occasionally posted photos from my travels on Instagram. One picture of me on a mountain peak at sunrise with my arms outstretched was captioned, "The end of one thing, the start of another." The comments were no longer filled with hate, but with messages of support and encouragement from friends and strangers alike. I felt lighter than I had in years. I started dating again, but cautiously. I was no longer the naive man who gave everything without a second thought. I learned to observe, to listen, and to value genuine connection and emotional honesty above all else. I knew I deserved better. Old friends who heard what happened reached out. Some were shocked, some offered pity, but most expressed admiration for how I had handled the situation. One of them, who had once advised me to be the bigger man, just ride it out for the sake of peace, called me specifically to apologize. "Lucas, man, I was so out of line," he said. "Looking back, I'm so glad you didn't listen to me. With people who have no bottom line, any compromise is just self-destruction." I shared what I had learned from my failed marriage with my friends, that a relationship isn't your entire life, and you should never sacrifice your own self-worth. A healthy partnership is about mutual growth, not one-sided consumption. My story resonated with many of them. I was even invited to speak at a few local events, sharing my experience to help others trapped in toxic relationships. I used my story to show them how to escape the shadow of betrayal, how to use the law as a shield, and how to reclaim their own strength. My talks were met with standing ovations. My new business thrived, bolstered by my positive public image. I had transformed from a burnout tech drone into a respected and increasingly well-known entrepreneur. One day, a strange package arrived. Inside was a letter. It was from Chloe, sent from prison. The pages were filled with her cramped handwriting, a long, rambling mess of regret, a desperate plea for freedom, and a nostalgic recounting of our good times. She asked if I remembered our first date, the name of the restaurant. She asked if I remembered the off-key love song I sang when I proposed. She begged me to visit her, to forgive her. I read the entire letter without emotion. Then, I walked into the kitchen and turned on the gas stove. The blue flame licked at the cheap paper, instantly consuming her words. As I watched it turn to ash, I felt no hatred, no pity, just a quiet certainty that the ugly past and the woman who inhabited it were truly and completely gone from my life. Real closure isn't forgetting. It's remembering and feeling nothing at all. I learned about the fates of the others in bits and pieces over time. Mark Peterson was fired. In his divorce from Sarah, he was found guilty of adultery and fraudulent conveyance of assets and was left with nothing. Jobless, homeless, and with his reputation in tatters, he ended up working dead-end gigs, a broken man. After Chloe was incarcerated, Karen suffered a major health crisis. The relatives and friends who had once flattered her because of her connection to me now wanted nothing to do with her. She tried to come to my office several times to beg for money, but my security always turned her away. I had missed her. Davies passed along a final message. "You and your daughter brought this upon yourselves. Blame no one else." I later heard she died alone in the hallway of a public hospital one winter, unable to afford proper care. Her funeral was a lonely affair. I read about these things in the local news, feeling as detached as if I were reading a story about strangers. It was all over. I transferred a generous final payment to Mr. Davies, thanking him for his professionalism and dedication throughout the long battle. He told me that Chloe was a model prisoner and might get out early for good behavior. But even then, what future was there for a convicted felon with a ruined credit history and years of disconnection from the world? It was a bleak picture. I moved. I sold the condo that held so many painful memories and got rid of everything from my old life. On the balcony of my new apartment, I set up a small table and a nice tea set. I brewed a pot of expensive tea, watched the city lights twinkle below, and savored the quiet, peaceful solitude. The air smelled of fresh tea and new beginnings. My life had a second act. A few years later, my company was flourishing. I had met a wonderful woman, kind, intelligent, and supportive. We built our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect and trust. It was stable, sweet, and real. I also went back to school part-time and got my license as a counselor. Every weekend, I volunteered at Metro General Hospital, offering free counseling services to patients and their families. It was the same hospital where Chloe had been a patient all those years ago. Returning there now, I felt a world away from the man I used to be. One afternoon, after my shift, I was walking out of the main building. Near the entrance, I saw a figure that was both familiar and strange. It was Chloe. She must have been released from prison. She was wearing plain, worn-out clothes. She was rail-thin, her face gaunt, and her eyes held the dull, empty look of someone who has spent a long time at the bottom. She saw me at the same time. I was walking toward my new car, my partner by my side. We must have looked like a different species, polished, happy, and completely out of place in this world of sickness and grief. Her body jolted. She instinctively tried to shrink back, but she seemed frozen to the spot, unable to approach, just watching me from a distance with an incredibly complex expression. I met her gaze calmly. In that single look, years collapsed. My eyes held no hatred, no anger, no pity, and no sympathy. There was only the quiet peace of settled dust. She didn't have the courage to approach. Her head slowly bowed, as if the effort cost her everything, and she turned. Dragging her feet, she shuffled away, her back stooped and defeated. Her lonely figure was quickly swallowed by the bustling crowd at the hospital entrance, and then she was gone. I turned my gaze away. My partner squeezed my hand gently. "What is it?" she asked. I shook my head and smiled at her. "Nothing. Just someone I used to know." We walked to the car side by side. The afternoon sun was warm on my skin. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of sunshine and cut grass. My life had been forged in fire, reborn from the ashes. A new chapter had long since begun. The future was bright, and it was full of hope.